Okay. Okay. We'll call the meeting to order. Let's go ahead and start with a roll call for committees members.
Representative Bear,
Here.
Representative Burkhart,
Here.
Vice Chairwoman Duncan. Here. Representative Ayer,
Here.
Representative Heiner. Representative Gray.
Guess he's excused.
Representative Sherwood. Representative Western. Chairman Greer.
Here. All right, good morning. It's our first minerals meeting here of our budget session. This morning, we've got 4 bills to consider. 3 are committee bills that have been worked through the interim. The 4th bill, which is House Bill 9, is a bill that comes to us from the Tribal Relations Select Committee, who was authorized by the legislature to draft legislation, but still needs to come through the proper interim committee when we're in session. I know almost everybody, or recognize almost everybody in the audience. We'll stick to our standard protocols. Seems to work the very best for us, which is wait to be addressed by the chair, reference the chair, and then the representative who's asking the question. And for the representatives, the same way, Mr. Chairman, and then, of Director Parfit, and Director Parfit and ask the question. Keep things civil. I don't see us getting much out of hand today with our bills, but just in case we do, that seems to work the best. And let's get some good bills put together, take them up to the floor, get them debated. So with that, we'll go ahead and start with House Bill 45, Mine Reclamation Bonding Voluntary Assigned Trusts. And I've asked the department to walk us through this bill with their comments or any issues with it. They've been heavily involved. So with that, Director Parfit, if you would please come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Todd Parfit, Director of the Department of Environmental Quality. And with me is Kyle Wentland, the Administrator of the Land Quality Division. So just thought we'd walk through the bill. It's been addressed thoroughly during the interim, but this is the Mine Reclamation Bonding Voluntary Assigned Trust. And just to start out, page 2, line 4 modifies bonding provisions and directs the Environmental Quality Council to promulgate rules for a voluntary assigned trust program for coal, bentonite, trona, and uranium. It's important to point out the term voluntary. This is a voluntary program. It applies to permits and licenses, not notifications. And so specifically, it would not apply to limited mining operations or LMOs. And it would bond all or a portion of the full cost of reclamation and reduces the risk to the state. On page 2, line 17, identifies what the promulgated rules shall include. And first off, it's that the participation is voluntary, as I mentioned. The second is that the amount necessary to fully fund the voluntary assigned trust is recommended by the Land Quality Division Administrator and determined by the Director for each permit or license. And this is done through what's called a Director's Bond Letter. And it's important to point out that this is not a bond pool. Each entity will have to have full bonding for their reclamation obligation. And then third, for each payment plan for a voluntary assigned trust, the following applies. The department first shall provide the state treasurer with a copy of the director's annual bond letter, which includes the reclamation obligation and the estimated mine life and duration of reclamation. And this is so that the state treasurer can make sound investment decisions. Second, annual payments are to be no less than 5% of the total annual reclamation bond obligation until it's fully funded. Important to point out that we do an annual bond obligation evaluation and adjustment.
So Director, just on that point on the 5%, we're could be talking about we are talking about very large sums of money, and it's reviewed every year, and this was a discussion. I think initially it was recommended as a much higher percentage, and we're like, no, 5 is workable. Is there a problem with it being even lower than 5? What administratively, does that cause any heartburn?
Mr. Chairman, and I think Mr. Wetland can articulate that pretty well.
Sure, Mr. Wetland. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, it's really kind of a twofold or two-pronged answer to that, and I appreciate the question. First one is it's designed, the whole trust or assigned trust is one voluntary, and it's designed to reduce risk ultimately to the state. Second component of that is when you look at the surety rates and they include both premium and collateral assignment, the 5% is less than what you would see as the total obligation company is currently paying. Let's say they're paying 1.5% premium plus assigned collateral, you get to double digits pretty quick. So this is in line and actually should be less than what those obligations are. And then long term, if you look at inflation and look at this growing or having a situation where this fund continues to replace those sureties or letters of credit or things over time, it has to grow. So that 5% becomes important and making that happen over a period of years, given whatever term period that is, depending on the size of the ultimate bond. So you have those three answers to that, Mr. Chairman, and that's where we are with that one.
Sure. Go ahead. Let me follow up on that, and then I'll go to you, Representative Western. Just get myself refreshed, and as y'all, I missed our last meeting, the only minerals meeting I've ever done. But I think it was the second answer was, basically with the savings of not going to a surety, the 5% savings ought to be available. And that's what you're
Right.
shaking your head yes on.
There is considerable savings there. And, that really is where the money is at.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead, Representative Western. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Wellen, obviously this doesn't apply to coal, which is deeply unfortunate, but for the uranium companies, if I understand correctly, some of their insurance premiums these bonds are really, really high. I mean, what are they paying generally? Do you know, just so I can get an idea of that delta and the savings?
Mr. Chairman, when you look at the basis points, you're looking at 1.5 to 3.5, depending on the industry. We really don't get a breakdown of that even through Dun and Bradstreet, but we do look and see globally what that is. That's just your premium. Then you're looking at, in most cases, and across the board, you're looking at anywhere from 40 to 60% collateral on top of that. So you get to an 11 or 12% fee when you look at the total obligation when you're paying for that surety. That's where the 5% comes in, and we believe that's a reasonable number that we got to through the discussions with industry. I would add that to soften this a little bit, we did put in the payment holiday too, that says you can, not put in one every 5 years, so that you do get, if you do get in a situation where you're transferring an obligation or you're financially just have a really difficult year, you do have an option of that holiday.
Okay. Just real quick. You said this obviously doesn't apply to coal. What did you mean by that comment?
Mr. Chairman, if I recall correctly, because of SMACRA and some of these mining companies have to be 100% collateralized at all times on their bonds, that
Okay.
it precludes them from being able to participate in this. That was my understanding.
No, this was, it was set up for coal primarily was our goal. We'll talk. Yeah. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, that was my question.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Representative Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think just to clarify that a little bit, more of a statement than more of a comment than a question, is just that because of the issue that was brought up by Representative Western, it's the investments that create the issue that separates coal from the other. And that's because they have to be invested in a different way, which is much less lucrative. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I believe the director will get to that, but for SMACRA, you have to protect 100% of the corpus. Non-coal, we have more freedom.
Right.
That's
Is that what you were getting to, Representative Western? Okay, just making sure. All right, good. You caught a couple of looks is all. So I just want to make sure we're all knew where we were going. Okay. All right, go ahead. Continue.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As was pointed out, the program does allow the participant to have a one-year payment holiday every 5 years. Otherwise, if there's a missed payment into the program, it would result in forfeiture of all the interest earned during the year that the payment was missed. And as part of that, the forfeited interest would be deposited into a fund for unfunded mine reclamation. And this bill would actually create that fund that would be necessary to do that. And then the remaining bond obligation, and this gets to some of the questions, is the remaining bond obligation must be covered by other acceptable bonding instruments. So everybody has to be 100% bonded for their reclamation obligation. Turning to page 4, line 20, and this starts to get into the distinction between the coal and the non-coal. Funds in the assigned trust for coal are invested by the state treasurer as authorized by law to achieve the highest net return possible with preservation of 100% of the corpus of the assigned trust. All earnings or interest are credited to the balance of each voluntary assigned trust or participant. For the non-coal, that's on page 5, line 6, funds in the assigned trust for non-coal are invested by the state treasurer as authorized by law and in a manner to obtain the highest net return possible, less any administrative fees. The next item is page 5, line 19, which just specifies that investment options of the state treasurer are those authorized by law. No funds are to be withdrawn by the participant during the first year, and that's to avoid any penalties for early withdrawal to the system. Moving on to page 6, line 3, the assets of each assigned trust are to be made available solely to cover the department's cost of completing reclamation in the event of a foreclosure. Release of the trust assets are in accordance with existing bond release statutes, Wyoming Statute 3511-423. Page 6, line 10, the reclamation funds from the assigned trust are to be withdrawn last. Any over bonded amount, as we do the annual calculation, any over a bonded amount would be provided to the participant from any other available bond instruments first. And then each assigned trust will not be withdrawn until released by the director. And then page 7, line 2 talks about rules. And the rules need to provide a process for withdrawal of funds that exceed the bond obligation and provisions for transfer of an assigned trust to a new owner. And that's an important element. And then page 7, line 12, permits or licenses that include federal lands with federal bonding requirements can participate, but they need the approval of the federal agency involved. And then lastly, we have section 2 on page 7, section 2 directs the DEQ to draft and EQ, the Environmental Quality Council, to promulgate any rules necessary to implement this act. And then lastly, on section 3, makes the rulemaking provisions effective immediately upon becoming law. So we would be able to start the rulemaking process. And then section 1 of the act is effective July 1, 2022.
All right, thank you. Any further questions? I think we caught them as we went through, but okay, thank you, Director. Mr. Wetland, thank you. Does Treasurer's Office want to comment or you're here? I do have one question for the Treasurer's Office and I can ask, yeah, maybe have you come forward, Mr. Fleming. It should be just real quick. And again, I apologize. I missed our last meeting, so this may have been answered, but when we talk about the investments at the highest return possible, consistent with preservation, 100% of the corpus, my question is, does that take, I can't remember, does that take action by the legislature to designate which investment pool that goes to, or does the Treasurer's Office is that enough discretion to put it where you think it's appropriate?
Mr. Chairman, Don Williams, Deputy State Treasurer. Mr. Chairman, that's adequate language for us.
It's adequate. Okay, thanks, Don. Yeah. So, how are things over at the Treasurer's Office? I know you got them, Ms. JC.
Mr. Chairman, we're plugging along.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, so with that, I don't notice anybody from the Governor's Office. Okay, so with that, we'll take some comments. We'll start with the industry and then we'll move over to Shannon and go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Travis Deti with the Wyoming Mining Association. This is a good bill and a good concept. And there's been a lot of hard work put into it by both the committee and the agency with the input of industry. I think that this can move forward. And I think the most important thing, get the program set up. And you've got some companies in the other sectors very excited about this, ready to go in. Let's get it set up and let's see how it works. We may have to come back and revisit it. But I think the most important thing for this committee and for the body as a whole is to move forward on this, get it set up and let's see how it works. This is going to give it is voluntary. It's going to give companies some options to cover their bonding reclamation or their bonding obligations. Depending on how a company decides to do things, it's going to give them a little flexibility. And I think that flexibility is important. And it's just another tool in the toolbox to help a company cover its bonding obligations. So good concept, good bill. Thank you for all your work on it. And we support the bill, Mr. Chairman.
Yep, thank you. Let's go Representative Bear and then Bear. Aaron Bear is dead to me.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We probably talked about this, but I don't know if there's anything such thing as a typical obligation, but could you give me a range of the dollar amounts of the obligation that people are?
Certainly. So I think our larger companies, $300 to $400 million in bonding obligation, larger coal companies, smaller companies, roughly, let's see here. So I'm looking at my notes here. $500,000 to $1 million in cases. So it varies tremendously based on the size of the operation and the obviously the amount of disturbance and what they have to reclaim. So.
Representative Bear, do you have a question?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. And Mr. Deti, in my research with the coal companies in my area, I've gotten mixed reviews. Some of the smaller companies are interested in this program. Others, it really won't fit their model. And I think it's a good piece of legislation for the non-coal industry. I just want to make sure I'm getting the right picture in the coal industry. Is that what you're running into?
I think that's fair, Mr. Chairman. I think that's fair, Representative Bear. As the program gets set up, I think companies are going to have to look at it to see if it fits, if they can participate. And I think, and I would hope that if we are having issues with the bar being too high to participate, that we could come back and revisit that after we see how let's get it stood up first and then come back and revisit it if we need to.
Okay. Representative Hunter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Deti, this bill is targeted towards coal, bentonite, trona, and uranium. What about other mining applications? Why did we leave them out, such as gold, gravel even? Why didn't we include all the mining?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Heiner, I think the goal was to get it stood up for the for the larger sectors first. And then with the sand and gravel folks, I think they have expressed interest to come back at a later time and see if we can get them in. I think that my original point stands. Let's get the program stood up. And then, if those other folks want to come and try to get involved, I think the agency would be amicable to that at a later date. But I think the key is to get the program stood up.
But I'll just comment on that briefly, because I said, just get it organized, just get the regulators understanding it, just make sure people see how well it works, and then we can bring them in. At that point, we do too much, it'll be problematic. I think Mr. Detai's comments are, once we get this stood up, get a look at it, we can look at some tweaks. Maybe it makes it easier for industry to come in. Maybe we realize we need to be more stringent somewhere too. So I had a little bit of a hand in that, Representative, so you can blame me.
Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Okay, any other questions? All right, then.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Anderson? Yeah. I think it-
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Shannon Anderson on behalf of Powder River Basin Resource Council. And we would also like to thank you for the hard work over the interim. In this particular version of the bill, we do support it as well. We think it's a good program. Particularly, we're appreciated that it's not pool bonding. We've seen what's happened in Kentucky and West Virginia. That's not where Wyoming should go. So it's really important that we do still require 100% reclamation obligation for every mine in the state. And that's what this bill does. So that's good. And then the other piece that we really appreciate is that it is bankruptcy proofing a portion of our reclamation obligations. And that's going to be really important into the future. We don't know what's going to happen with markets and company portfolios and all of that. So this helps to protect the state into the future. So thank you for your hard work. And we look forward to seeing the bill move forward.
All right, any questions for Ms. Anderson? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to testify on this bill? Anyone else? Okay, with that, we'll go ahead and close public testimony. What is the committee's pleasure? Moved by Heiner, seconded by Representative Burkhart. Okay, doing any discussion? I think we did a pretty good job of fleshing that out. Okay, question being called, roll call vote.
Representative Bear,
Aye.
Representative Burkhart,
Aye.
Vice Chairwoman Duncan.
Aye.
Representative Air,
Aye.
Representative Gray,
Aye.
Representative Heiner.
Aye.
Representative Sherwood,
Aye.
Representative Western. Chairman Greer.
Aye.
8 ayes, 9 ayes.
Thank you. Okay, with this, I'm going to ask Representative Western to floor manage this for us. I will be pushing the Speaker Majority Floor Leader to get this bill in the docket as hard as I can, as much as they listen to me. So, hey, good job. I mean, it's kind of one of these situations, it's been like 11 years and I go, God, here's a situation. I mean, industry wants this, likes it. Regulators like it. Our folks that are looking out for our environment, those groups like it. Wow. Yeah, it can happen. So, all right. Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 46, Partnership Challenge Loan Program Amendments. And I think, Mr. Keefe, if you can walk us through these, you probably know this. Can you walk us through the bill?
Yes, sir. Morning, Minerals Committee members. Josh Keefe. I'm the finance manager at the Wyoming Business Council. I'd be happy to walk you through the bill. The intent of this bill really was to try and look at the programs at the Business Council, what was working, what was not working. And so these changes in front of you, I know it maybe looks like a lot, but I think that many of these will help to run programs more effectively, as well as fill a void in the traditional banking industry that really makes it difficult for businesses to continue to operate, sometimes as businesses get passed down or as they are asked to do certain things under contract. So with that, The first,
Do you have a copy of the bill with you, or?
I don't.
I
know.
noticed you didn't have one, so.
I apologize. Members on page 1, there's it's not colored. Nothing there. The next part is the sorry, hold on. I might have to get a correct bill. Just a sec. I have the reclamation bill.
Here you go.
Mr. Keefe, I apologize. I should have talked to you earlier, but I know you're familiar with all these programs and worked with them. So they're all tweaks that were requested by the Business Council with a few exceptions of additions by the committee. So
Yes, sir.
go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you. On page 2, under the definitions, you'll see on line 11, there's kind of a rebranding or renaming and consolidation of 2 programs to the 50/50 program. In the past, what was happened was one loan was called a bridge loan program, which in the banking world typically means less than 12 months. That was very confusing to bankers and hard to make them understand the goal of that program and the intent. And then also the merging of the guaranteed loan participation program as well. That one was specific to any deal that had a federal guarantee, such as a USDA or SBA loan. And that would allow the Business Council to participate with that as well. With that, the renaming is to the 50/50 program to cap out at a maximum participation from the Business Council at 2.5 million. That number was somewhat on purpose. Many of the community banks in the state of Wyoming, their internal legal lending limit is roughly 5 million. So we were trying to kind of take that as a guideline and put our maximum at that. Since the challenge loan has been incepted since 1998, these numbers have never changed. These limits have always stayed the same. And we all know with the rising costs of construction and everything else that I felt it prudent that this could make the programs a little more effective and help provide some incentive and risk mitigation from the bank side of things. On page 3, line 12, loan guarantee. This program, I honestly don't know when it was created. However, this program has never been utilized at the Business Council. I believe the intent was to try and have the state guarantee loans where we are not participating in loans. So just for a point of clarification, when we do these loans as a participation, we are literally putting money side by side into the deal with the bank versus a guarantee where the SBA and USDA, for example, when they say a loan is guaranteed, all that they're guaranteeing is the potential loss of a loan. So should something happen to that deal and liquidation has taken place, and we'll say there's $100,000 shortfall, if you had an 80% SBA guarantee, the bank would get $80,000 from the SBA and only take a hit for 20, if that makes sense. So I feel that the loan guarantee program is covered by other agencies and we've never used it. And so that was the reason for
So
recommending that go away.
Go back on the yoke, come up about 20,000 feet. We got you.
Okay. The next page 318, contract financing, again, is just to try and help those businesses with a certain type of financing that is really difficult to do in traditional banking. And hopefully that will be used. There are some sideboards later on in the bill that limits the amount that can be used for contract financing, as well as total amount that can be lent at $1 million in that type of loan within the fund. And then probably the biggest one is page 4, line 1, under succession financing. This was really to try and help pass down those existing businesses from one owner to the next. You'll see there is a sideboard right there in that paragraph that says the business cannot be in existence for less than 7 years. This was to try and make sure not only that as deals come in, I can do due diligence and look at trends and really underwrite it properly, but also that, we're not buying a business for a short term and trying to flip it or something like that kind of thing. So
So, Mr. Keefe, on that particular program, how long would you anticipate before the rules were put together if this were to pass this session?
Mr. Chairman, I anticipate that for succession financing and really all of the rules will have to be reworked.
For succession
but
planning in
For
particular?
succession planning in particular, I think, we would definitely make the July 1st deadline. I'm not worried about that.
Okay.
So. Let's see, there's no further changes on page 4. Page 5, line 11. This is another slight tweak to the programs and the fund. This is for economic development organizations. Historically, it was a cash match program where the business council could lend 50% of a project. However, it has been used once in the history of the business council. That is just my own personal opinion, because I believe many economic development organizations don't have the liquidity to be paying for half of a project that they want to do. And so this change is to do the 80-20 breakdown, where we would lend 80 and they would bring 20% to the table. And I think that can make that a little more obtainable and palatable for them as well. So. Moving on to the bottom of page 5 and top of page 6. Again, just in the spirit of rising costs to do projects and those types of things, we've put the limit at $1 million that the business council could participate with an economic development organization on that. Let's see here.
Mr. Chairman.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Representative. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Just
Just
reading.
quick question about that comment. Again, is this going back to 1998 since the last change in these limits?
Chairman Greer, Representative Bear, yes, sir. Think moving along. I'll move on to page 7, line 10 in that subparagraph. You'll see on the contract lending, the maximum loan amount is $200,000. In dealing with and receiving phone calls from various businesses around the state, it seemed that was a adequate level. I think it seems that most of the phone calls I receive are somewhere between $100,000 and $200,000, and so just to buy those raw materials to complete a contract typically. And then you'll see on line 14 on page 7, the maximum size for a succession loan is $500,000 for that. One important thing to say about the succession loan is also that we will be working with the local financial institution as well, just like we do with all of the other loan participations we do currently at the Business Council.
Mr. Keefe, it's a requirement, is it?
It is, yes, sir. Later on, it does say that that the Business Council shall participate. Page 8 is just basically saying that some of the existing programs will not be originated after July 1st. And then on page 9, I'll touch on the contract program again. Down on line 17, you'll see where it says that the business shall provide not less than 2 letters from financial institutions denying the application. I know we talked about this last month in Casper and kind of went back and forth. I know Senator Rothfuss, when we were in joint session, asked a number of questions about that. I also heard from the Bankers Association as well on that requirement. Mr. Meyer has said that they are not concerned about that requirement and that it's totally up to you guys if you want to leave that in there or not. I had put that in there to try and eliminate any perception of competition with the banks or anything like that. So. And then moving on to page 10, again, we probably the biggest one under the succession loan program is line 18, where it says that the council shall not participate in excess of 50%. Excuse me. And with that, I think that's all I have. Sorry.
Committee, any questions for Mr. Keith? Yeah, go ahead, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This succession loan program, I think it's a great idea. Since you've brought this to the committee, I'm trying to give you time here. Since you brought this to the committee, have you spoken to any interested parties in taking up this particular opportunity?
Chairman Greer, Representative Bear, I actually got a phone call yesterday from a bank here in Cheyenne asking about this program for a dental practice. So I think I probably get one probably at least once a month.
Once a month?
Yep.
Great. Thank you.
Any further questions, committee? Okay, Mr. Keith, I think I would have an ask of you if you could do sort of a bullet point of the programs. The programs are last, especially where we got the levels last modified. That'd just be useful. I think we've all got them, but probably scattered in a series of notes. So, and I know you've done that before.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. So the first one at the top would be the
Well,
challenge.
not today. If you could put that together for assistance on the floor.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I can do that.
Yeah.
Sorry. I say, do it from memory if you would like, but I can.
No, we gotta keep moving. So, okay, any further questions for Mr. Keith? Okay, anyone else wishes to testify on House Bill 46? Okay, oh, please come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Joe Mulberry. I'm the Deputy Commissioner in the Wyoming Division of Banking, and I am also currently serving as the Interim Commissioner until a permanent replacement for Albert Faulkner is named. I don't know if the committee is aware, but at the beginning of January, Albert left his position with our office, and so we're currently searching for his replacement. Joining me today is Jeremiah Bishop. He's another Deputy Commissioner in the Division of Banking. He oversees the banking and trust review programs within the division. By statute, our office is charged with performing an annual examination of the Partnership Challenge Loan Program. We perform a financial and compliance audit on or before April 1st annually and provide a completed report to the council, the governor, and LSO on or before May 1st annually. We reviewed this bill and have no concerns with any of the changes. If these changes are made, we will make the subsequent adjustments to our audit procedures going forward. And Jeremiah oversees that program every year, the review of this program. And so if the committee has any questions about our office's participation in that, we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Any questions, committee? I know, I guess congratulations are in order. Yeah. This committee receives a report from the Business Council on all loans and the status of those loans and the paybacks on them each year. So we very much appreciate that. So Mr. Bishop, welcome to the committee's meeting. And so how long have you been with the department?
I've been with the department, Mr. Chairman, for about a little over 9 years.
Oh, you're
9.5
an old
years. I've been
pro
in this
then.
position for about 2 years. So
Okay.
thank you.
All right. All right. Well, thank you. We appreciate the comments. Okay. Anybody else wishes to testify? Yep. Please come forward.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Lisa Johnson, Wyoming Economic Development Association. Just want to speak briefly in support of the bill. We believe that the Business Council has done a fine job of adjusting the program to meet the changing needs of businesses. And when businesses contact economic development offices, the finance options are one of the first questions they ask. And so we feel like this is a step in the right direction. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Johnson? All right. Thank you. Anyone else wishes to testify? No one else? Okay, we'll close public testimony. What is the committee's pleasure? So we'll move by Representative or Vice Chair Duncan and seconded by Representative Heiner. Okay, any discussion on the bill? Wait, discussion? Question being called, a roll call vote on House Bill 46, please.
Representative Bear,
Aye.
Representative Burkhardt,
Aye.
Vice Chairwoman Duncan. Representative Air,
Aye.
Representative Gray,
No.
Representative Heiner. Representative Sherwood.
Aye.
Representative Western,
We'll give Representative Western a second to get to a seat.
aye. Chairman Greer,
Aye.
8 aye, 1 no.
Okay. So recommend do pass. Representative Bear, will you floor manage this for me? Thank you. Okay, next bill for consideration is House Bill 9. And I believe Representative Larson, you're chairman of the select travel or the travel select committee? Okay. All right. I'm always ready, Representative Larson.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I think if I allow me to give you a why this come up here, then I'm going to do it make much more sense. Business Ready program is designed to, if you look at the in A, it says the purpose of this article is to promote economic development at a city, town, and county level in order to create additional economic health and a stronger state. And then historically, from time to time, the Business Council has entered into BRC agreements with tribal entities. And recently, and over the last, probably since I've been in the legislature, that has not happened. And that's been because if you go into further in this statute in 601 and you come to H, it says the council may also enter into a cooperative agreements with each of the tribes in order to promote the purpose of this. And so then what does this cooperative agreement look like and why is it necessary? And so the Business Council says, you know, what does this mean? Went to the AG. They says, well, do you have a cooperative agreement to participate in the business? They said no. And so then what would that look like? And in essence, the cooperative agreement would look very similar to the contractual agreement you would have if you were the city, town, or county entering into an agreement with the Business Council. And so Business Council and the governor's office came to us and said, you know, is there some way we can try and fix that just a little bit? And where we don't have this burden on the tribes to participate into this program. And we looked at it and we come back and the question we had is, why is there this subsection H after subsection A? Why weren't the tribes just included at the very beginning to be included in economic development? Senator Case, who serves on our tribal relations committee in 30 years in the legislature, got pondering that and thought back, and it goes back to the time when Fred Paraday was Speaker of the House and when this was put in. And the concern then is that they run into a constitutional thing by loaning money to the tribes as separate government entity. Okay. So how valid was that? So then we readdressed that, went back to, the attorneys went to the Attorney General and they says, no, you're fine. That should not be a matter. So what we've done in this bill, if you, and I'm going to skip, if you'd go to the bottom of page 2, is what we do is we amend A, and we said it is the purpose of the article to promote economic development at a city, town, county, and levels on the Wind River Reservation to create additional economic impact. And then if a tribe, one of the tribes enters into that with the business council, they'll have to then create a contract that both parties, just like anybody else, would feel comfortable with. Collateral, anything that pertains there. And then we go on in page 4, and we go through the statutes, and we conform that language to get rid of the cooperative agreements. And then we go into 912-801, similar situation on the community's facilities program. And so we insert them up at the beginning where the act is created, and we do away with the cooperative agreements. Mr. Chairman, then if I could come back to the top of page 2, there's a reference in here in 81103, which is definitions. And we create, and you're going to see this in another bill, where reference to cooperative tribal body. So you could have the Northern Arapaho tribe applying for a BRC program. You could have the Eastern Shoshone tribe applying for one, or you could have them doing something jointly on the reservation. Maybe developing a hot springs recreation area or something of that nature where they share the common land. And we've had over the course of time, those joint entities those names have changed. There's been the business council, the joint business council, there's been a number of things. And so we're creating this, and you'll see it later in statute, to say cooperative tribal governing body is from now on going to represent whatever name that is that they choose to take. And it'll be a reference that just stays in statutes and will apply to that. So that's why that's in there. So, Mr. Chairman, be happy to answer any questions.
Committee, any questions? Yeah, Representative Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Larson, can you tell me, I'm just not that familiar, new on the committee with this Business Ready program. What kind of projects have the tribes been attempting to do in the past and not been able to do because of these issues that you're bringing up here, trying to correct? Have there been any?
Mr. Chairman and Representative Bear, to answer your last question first, as they've been, one that they, since I've been on tribal relations, that where they were considering is broadband expansion through a tribal owned entity, Wyoming Internet, found that they couldn't. And that's been a number of years ago. Okay, that's when I was first on tribal relations. Historically, I think that there was, I can't tell you the programs that they were able to participate. I want to say, and I'm going to look here for, was the Frank D. Wise, was that a Business Ready? To be safe, I don't know. Okay.
Representative Bear. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just follow-up question. This is going to be kind of out there, but I want to just make sure it's addressed. The tribes can and do at times build gambling facilities. Is there any sideboards on this program that would keep that from the state from getting involved with that?
Well, Mr. Chairman, Representative Bear, the state is already involved in that because on the Shoshone tribe, it's the State Gaming Commission that oversees that. The Northern Arapaho tribe, through a lawsuit, we pushed back on that in the previous administration, the Geringer years. They took that to lawsuit, and that jurisdiction lies with the Native American Game Commission. But on the Eastern Shoshone side, once we amended that, so to some degree, the state is already involved there. But I think the question then would be, and it's only allowed on the reservation, at this point unless there's sports betting, unless that gets changed. But right now it's only on the reservation. Should an entity come before the business council, they would then have an opportunity to evaluate that proposal and determine if that's qualifies for the BRC funding.
So as a follow-up, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would the Wyoming Business Council, maybe this is a question for them, could they get involved with investing in a gambling facility?
We'll ask them when they come up, Representative. Or if you don't know, you don't know. It's fine.
I don't know.
So, yeah, go ahead, Representative Grant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and ask questions on the last two bills. I was waiting to say this. I missed the roll call. When we announced roll, I am here though. I wanted to ask on this just from a high level, because we didn't hear this in the interim. It came through the tribal relations. And I think it got to the previous question. I mean, I'm just trying to track this through. What were the implications of this on the ground? I mean, were there instances where the business council was saying you don't qualify to be able to apply for projects? Because it is a little unclear. It starts out and says, it lists out the entities that can apply, and the tribes aren't listed. And then later it goes through and says, well, you can create these cooperative agreements. And so that appears to reference the tribe. So I'm just wondering, is this more of a cleanup of the statutes, or has this had real implications on the ground? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman and Representative Gray, both. So we think the end result is a cleanup of the statute where it was crafted and put into place with implications that were not intended. I think when it was originally put into place, the intent was always to allow the tribes to be able to participate in that. But some of the concern that may have been there was a constitutional thing. And then when you're lending money or you're providing this opportunity, loan or grants, right? So if we go to the loan component of it there, the business council traditionally would ask for some sort of collateral. Well, does a government want to be required to provide collateral? Well, in that cooperative agreement, those may be some of the stuff that would be in this blanket cooperative agreement. And so in some instances, they may say, yeah, we're okay with that. We've got, for this instance, we may want to provide collateral. And in another instance, they may say, it's just not that big a deal to us. No, thank you. That's no different than if you, as a city or town coming in and you apply for BRC, you're going to sit down with the business council and you're going to craft out the conditions of that loan. And you're going to have to provide collateral. You're going to have to do some things there that you either say is okay or is not okay, just like when we go to the bank and do anything there. And so what this does is, instead of having this blanket cooperative agreement, it will come in, it'll be by loan. And they can then address the conditions of the requirements that the business council feels they need to have to lend the money. And then the tribes would be able to respond back and say that seems reasonable to them, and they would accept those conditions, or they would reject them and not participate in them.
Any further questions, follow-up? Yeah, go ahead, Representative Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative, on the matter of the casinos on the reservation, am I correct that they paid off those loans relatively quickly, and those casinos are really an economic boom?
Mr. Chairman and Representative Burkhart, I don't know all the intimate details of their business dealings with and each tribe has its own gambling entity. I think the Northern Arapaho tribe has been very successful in theirs, and I think the Eastern Shoshone tribe has been too. Although I'm not as familiar with what they've done as I have been with the Northern Arapaho tribe. There's a number of casinos on the reservation by both tribes, but
Follow up, Mr. Chairman.
No, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Representative, a little different question. The fact that the reservation is looked at, the tribes are looked at as almost separate nation status, does that impact this at all?
Mr. Chairman and Representative Burkhardt, I think in the sense that I kind of outlined with Representative Gray, there's as a governmental entity goes into a loan application, grant, no, but on a loan application, repayment requirements, collateralization, those types of things are different. And that's why this fits well up here, is because depending on what the issue is, may or may not, the business council may feel that those are important conditions to have, or they may not, and vice versa. With the tribe, they may feel that those going into it, that yes, these are the conditions that we think are appropriate, and we may have to subordinate this position that a government may traditionally have in order to get this funding for economic development.
Any further questions, Craig? Representative Larson, I have a couple.
Okay.
So business ready community loans and grants, sometimes they work directly through a governmental entity, a county or city, but a lot of them work through development organizations. And so they then are in essence sponsored by the county. So we can look at industrial parks, for example, and then the CDO will own the industrial park as an asset for economic development. But they've had this relationship with the county or the municipality. So the tribes are wearing, in my view, three different hats here almost, because not only are they preparing assets like a CDO to be available, inventory, so to speak, to stimulate private development, they actually act as the business themselves. They act with a hat of a CDO because they're trying to stimulate economic development and good jobs and grow their community. And now we are allowing them to act in the role of, say, a county. Tell me where my reasoning is or my observation is wrong.
No, Mr. Chairman, I think that observation is accurate. So if I may rehearse what I think I just heard you say. So you, in the traditional sense, the business council may come to the city of my town of Lander and provide a BRC loan that then they could loan out to Representative Air to do this project with the conditions for repayment. And at the end of the day, there's that relationship that would exist here as well. So if Representative Air had this business opportunity and it was on the reservation, then he could come to the tribes. Tribes could be that same governmental sponsor for the BRC program. That was the easy traditional one. Then the other, if I understand the program correctly, is maybe the tribes want to do a business park to stimulate that. Then that may be a direct request from the business council to the tribe, or perhaps a joint tribal venture for BRC funds to develop a business park, after which time then, if Representative Burkhardt or Representative Duncan want to establish a business there, then they would do it in that traditional payback way, if I've understood that well. Then likewise, and I think this is the unique one, is that the tribes also have for-profit business entities, unlike a county or a town. And so this provision in here, again, depending on the loan, gives the business council the flexibility to adjust those conditions because it's a non-traditional BRC to government application, because the applicant is also the owner of the business, which you wouldn't see with the city of Lander or the county of Fremont County, right?
Yeah, Representative, I was asking you right at the end of my question, but I think we're, I think. I
Well,
understand.
are we on the same page?
We
Mr.
are,
Chairman?
we are, Representative. So then on some of the questions that were asked, has Fremont County ever rejected an offer to, in essence, sponsor a request for the tribes?
Mr. Chairman, I think the argument there, and that's just because I live in that
Right.
world,
Right.
is what jurisdiction does Fremont County have over the tribes who are a sovereign nation within their own geographic boundaries to sponsor them?
She answered my question with a question.
Well, okay.
I applaud your
fair-
audacity, but yeah.
Fair enough. I thought I was learning from you. And that is, and so then the tribes would come back and I think their approach is, as a sovereign government, yet citizens of the state, do we have the capacity? Was the intent in this act to allow them to participate in the program? We're seeing it as yes, not required, Fremont County not required to, or any of the municipalities in there to do that, but the tribes would have that ability to do it.
Okay. Yeah. No, thank you. All right. That stimulate. Yeah. Go ahead, Representative.
Well, that kind of just to help me understand it better, could you describe what difference there would be in the tribe and in the tribal people getting a loan from this program under the cooperative agreement they had previously to what they would do now under this program with this change, where they can only apply directly?
Yeah, so Mr. Chairman, Representative Vera, I think what I can't answer to what the cooperative agreements may have been in the past. I don't know that. What I'll tell you, or the reason for this being here, is the Business Council says we don't have this blanket cooperative agreement. Thus, the tribes, jointly or separately, are not allowed to participate in this program, which statutes clearly suggest they do have the capacity. And so we're trying to clean up the roadblock there to allow them to do that. So then hopefully, to answer your question, Representative Air, is now, if they're up here at the very beginning, the Business Council could engage in them, have those discussions on the type of BRC funding, or that it be grant or loan, and to whom, and then develop the application or the document to govern that transaction in a way that's, of course, protects the state's interests and hopefully is in the best interest of the tribe, the entity in making that application.
Yeah. Vice Chair Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Larson, you confused me, but then I think the way you said something, let me clarify. So the way you said it was that basically the tribes through this program would be a private business ownership, whereas that's not allowed in the BRC program. Under the normal circumstances, an entity couldn't own it, whereas it's a municipality would own it, correct? Okay, follow up. Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, but the way I'm understanding it though, the tribes are somewhat of a government entity in and of themselves. So they are actually just like a town, community entity, government entity of themselves. So they're not really a private business in this sense, because they're a government entity in and of themselves, sovereign nation, correct? So they would still be, if I'm looking broader, they still would be and fall under the same BRC as, not like my business, private, but they're a sovereign nation. So wouldn't they still be the town of land or the county government because they're a sovereign nation?
Mr. Chairman.
I'm confused.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative Duncan. And that is one of my, probably the best talents I have, is to confuse people. And so thank you for that. So you're right in that they would have the same standing, if that's the right word, as a town or a county because they're a separate government entity. The difference, the nuance that comes in with the tribes that is different than, say, the city of Lander. The city of Lander doesn't have any for-profit businesses.
Okay.
Okay.
Got it.
And the tribes do. And so they may come, did I clear that up?
Yep.
Shut.
Committee, any further questions? I just have one softball for you. Because you've been working this committee. The for-profit businesses the tribes run are a form of economic development for their nation, right? Is that fair? Okay, thank you. Okay, anyone else? Stick tight, Representative. I think you got the rest of our morning. So anyone else wishes to testify on this? Yeah, please come forward and introduce yourself for us. These are tricky for some reason.
Green. Hello? Okay. Hi, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. My name is Yukna Soldruev. I'm a member of the Northern Arapaho Tribe. I was a small business owner on the reservation. All of the questions you asked were pretty valid. Understanding how that relationship works for private tribal members to own a business is really difficult on the reservation. Going through this bill and looking at the amendments, I totally agree with. And I see that moving forward, approving these amendments would really benefit the tribe. And both tribes for that matter. Having a small business on the reservation is difficult. I've seen loans being denied before, especially to myself, because through the Wind River Development Fund, there's only so much they can help you get loans for. And if your business grows, like it did for me, I didn't have the collateral or the assets to move forward to grow my business. And so reading these amendments, seeing how it can actually benefit the tribes on both sides is really beneficial. And I really agree with this bill. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for coming and testifying. Committee, any questions? So did you work with the select committee and testify and through the process?
No, actually, I'm here on a different matter.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
thank you.
All right, okay.
Yes, there's a reception tonight at 6 to 8. Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
yeah, thank
Have a
you.
good
We
day.
appreciate the comments. Anyone else wishes to testify? Yep. Spring Niven, come on up.
Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to be here and testify today. My name is Travis McNiven. On behalf of the Northern Arapaho Business Council, they greatly appreciate the work that the Tribal Relations Committee put into this bill to clarify the statute, the understanding of the AG's office, and basically allow this door to be opened. They fully support the bill, the amendments, and the work that the Tribal Relations Committee did over the interim on this, and support moving forward. Thank you.
Okay, any questions for Travis? None? Okay. I apologize, Jess, did the business council want to comment on this or? Yeah, I went a little out of order. Okay, thanks, Travis. That Representative Larson had covered all of your interests. Yeah.
Joint Minerals members, Josh Keefe, Finance Manager at the Business Council. As the good representative touched on, trying to do projects on the reservation has always been the intent. But then I think it's also important to remember that every single deal that gets done in the BRC program, especially when it involves any kind of business entity that may be indirectly benefiting, is all AG approved. And so that will still be the case with this as well. And so I know it was confusing and a little sticky when we were talking about this, but please know that that same procedure will be followed going forward, that every deal for the BRC program will still have to be AG approved as they come through. So that's really all I have to add.
Committee, any questions? Okay, thank you. Anyone else wishes to testify on this House bill? Anyone else? Okay, we'll close public testimony on House Bill 9. Thank you, Representative Larson. What's the committee's pleasure? Moved by Sherwood, seconded by Western. Okay, any discussion on the bill? Okay. All right, no need to walk through it. We're good. Okay, all right. Question being called. Roll call vote on House Bill 9.
Representative Bear,
No.
Representative Burkhardt,
Aye.
Vice Chairwoman Duncan. Aye. Representative Air,
Aye.
Representative Gray,
Aye.
Representative Heiner.
Aye.
Representative Sherwood,
Aye.
Representative Western. Chairman Greer,
Aye,
8 aye, 1 no.
thank you. I assume you will be the one floor managing that.
If you'll allow me, Mr. Chairman, sure.
Yeah, and you'll be receptive if a sideboard or two is dreamt up over the weekend.
Always.
Okay, thank you. All right. The next item for our consideration is House Bill 47. My apologies to the agency and the director sat through the whole meeting, but we are going to ask, this bill had been worked by Representative Heiner from our committee and Representative Larson. And we're going to ask Representative Larson to sort of walk us through this. And then Representative Heiner, please just let me know whatever comments you might have or additions, unless you wish to go sit. Okay, yeah. All right. Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. In some regards, I would almost think that you would be more familiar with the bill than I am. But of course, just to remind you, the intent of the legislature was really to try and resolve this issue that we had prior to 2015, where when industry came into a community, the community had to forefront all of the infrastructure impacts, then collect the sales tax on the back end. And that was always a challenge for them. So in 2015, I believe Revenue brought forth the proposal that that said what we could do is allow the Industrial Siting Commission to estimate the impacts of a project and then take a request from local governments on what they feel that those impacts would be and provide funding to them up to 2.76% of the value of the estimated cost of the project. And that 2.76 comes out, if you take the distribution of the sales tax, it comes out of the state's portion. The locals remained whole. And so we adopted that, and I still concur that and think that we needed to do that for our local governments. But then getting a few years down the road and seeing how this has been implemented and the We've had a number of wind projects, a Trona project. We've seen how this worked. We found some gaps, as you guys well recall, where perhaps the Industrial Siding Commission wasn't really couldn't provide the findings of fact for detailing the basis for the cost, the total dollar determination requested by the municipalities. We sometimes seen applications where requests were made perhaps for law enforcement, additional law enforcement during the construction of this project, but no law enforcement were hired. Or there would be applications for things that perhaps didn't really apply to impacts from the project. And so going back probably 4 years, the Appropriations Committee says, we kind of time out here. We kind of maybe need to adjust this just a little bit, like what we're doing. But this is indeed, we're using the state's portion of the sales tax. And so there really needs to be some accountability here. And so we put some guidelines in here to require the agency, the Industrial Siding Commission, to be a little more specific in their findings. And I need to come back and talk to you about that just a little bit. And then in looking at the costs, the reimbursement costs of 2.76%, you'll recall last year, this committee, we brought that in from appropriations, and I think we had dropped it down to 2.25. This committee dropped it on down to 2, went, and on the last day, it was the last next bill coming up when we ended. So Representative Heiner and I had met with the County Commission Association, and we agreed to work with them. They were anxious about that going down to the 2%. So over the course of the summer, they presented to us what we thought was really a solid approach, and that instead of just having one tier from the minimum amount of what is required to go before the Industrial Siding Committee, a tiered layer. And we went through a couple of versions of that. First, it started out, I believe, 500 million to 750 to $1 billion. And then the argument, not the argument, but the position of the county commissioners is most of these projects are in that 300 million to 800 million or $500 million range. And those are often the ones that will have the most impact and would perhaps require an enhanced rate over perhaps say something that's $1 billion, because there'd be $1 billion would be at 1% would bring in more than the 300 million at 2. And so we went to this staggered approach and agreed with that. And so in this, you'll recall that we come in and from 300 that we go 2.25% for projects, 350 million up to but less than 850 million. And then from 850 million up to $1 billion, we use, what is it, Representative Heiner? 2? We're at 2, it's at 1.5%. And then anything at $1 billion and over is at 1. Now, then working with the county commissioners, again, they says, we would really like to have this lower end at 2.76%, because there are just going to be times when we think that 2.25% isn't enough. So we chewed on that bone for a while and come back and says, well, what if we give the municipality the ability, if they could document to the Industrial Siding Commission that there was a deficiency at that rate, that then they could raise that up to as much as another 2%. 0.25% and bringing it up to 2.55, I believe, 2.55% as a cap. And so those are the changes that we made in the bill, and that's the way we've approached this. And I would suggest to you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, with the work that's gone into this, I think that this does a couple of things. I think that it does provide accountability. I think that it still provides the opportunity for counties to not be negatively impacted by these projects in the community and have to make them up in the back. And then I think that it also helps us to be accountable to the rest of the state on sales tax generation and preserve that just a little bit. Mr. Chairman, if I may, the Chairman of the Industrial Siding Commission, Mr. Esch, pointed out one thing that I would maybe suggest.
Mr. Esch, just a director of the program. Is that correct?
Director of the program, Commissioner Director, all around good guy, if I may, Mr. Chairman. He pointed out to me a few minutes before the meeting on page 3, if you'd go to that, on page 3 on line 13, it says determination if requested by the applicant. Well, the applicant would be the project owner. It might be Danny Ayers' big mill, and they're not really concerned about. And so we probably need to change that determination if requested by the municipality or whatever the right county or municipality.
Okay, we'll get the right language of it because it can be a county or municipality. So we'll make sure we get that right. Okay.
Anyway, it needs a correction.
Okay, any questions for Representative Larson? Okay. All right, Representative Larson, you'll stick close till we get done. I think what I'm going to do is ask Mr. Esch to just come up and comment on this, and then we'll go to the County Commissioners Association. Just trying to think of what was the best way to do it, and then we'll take public comment from there. So.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Luke Esch. I'm the administrator of the Industrial Siding Division at the Wyoming Department of Environmental Quality.
So I promoted you as you were sitting right next to your boss. Is that right? Sorry. And Representative Larson promoted you even further. So
I heard that. That's very complimentary. Thank you all. Mr. Chairman, the department has no position on this bill. We did want to point out just a few things in terms of the difference between what the impact assistance payments would be currently versus under the new bill.
Okay.
For in one scenario with an estimated material cost of $350 million, at the current statute of the 2.76, that would result in $9.66 million. Under the proposed statute at the 2.25, that would be 7.88, so a difference of about $1.7 million there. Scenario 2, if a material cost of $351 to $850 million, at the $850 million level, currently would be about $23.4 million in impact assistance payments at the maximum. Under the new proposed formula of 2%, it would be $17 million. Greater than the $851 million. So for a project with $1 billion, that would be 27.6 million currently, and 1.5 would be $15 million. So those are kind of the differences of what we're talking about. The change that was brought up by Representative Larson today regarding the page 3 and is also would be duplicated on page 10 for the use tax. Yeah, this goes back to who is really requesting the impact assistance funds. The applicant really has very little involvement in the impact assistance payments. It's more the counties, cities, and towns that are requesting the impact assistance payments. So if the intent is to have the counties, cities, and towns have the ability to request that justification for rejecting the impact assistance request, it would be my suggestion that the language be included, the counties, cities, and towns on that section.
And I think, Mr. Esch, what I'm seeing is that term counties, cities, and towns is the correct term to go in there. Do you agree with that?
Mr. Chairman, I would agree.
Okay. And just while we're on that, let's make sure the committee all sees where we're at on page 10.
Be line 2 on page 10, I believe, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Ash? Administrator Ash? Okay, all right. Yeah, go ahead, Representative Banner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Administrator Ash. Appreciate you being here. As you looked at the impact that these tiered approaches would be on future awards, I appreciate you doing the numbers for us, but did you have the chance of looking back to see what impact this tiered approach would have been on some past awards for the past couple of years?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Heiner, I have not done that.
Okay, thank you.
In line with with Representative Heiner's question, though, isn't it the case, or is my recollection correct, that not all of the projects went to 100% of the allowable, but it was certain percentages? I'm pretty sure we saw a list of that early on.
Mr. Chairman, there was something put together for the committee a couple of years back, and it analyzed the past 4 years of projects. And on average, the impact assistance payments for all the projects was at 65% of the maximum.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. If I may, Mr. Chairman, I've ran those numbers.
Yeah.
You never ask a question you don't have the answer for.
Good man.
So I learned from friends like you, but each past years and Representative Larson and Mr. Raymond and I worked on this, but on a typical year or the last couple of years of $35 million award, this impact would have reduced that by $400,000 or to $600,000. So very minimal impact. It just tightens up the site boards.
Do you agree? Is that pretty close?
Mr. Chairman, I believe I have heard that number discussed in past meetings.
I was just trying to keep in our question and answer format a little bit, but no, good information. Okay. Any other questions for Administrator Ash? Okay. We have one person on Zoom. So it's Mr. Gozar from Albany County. Let's go ahead and get him invited in and set up. And in the meantime, if we could get the County Commissioners Association, any folks with them to come forward. Representative Larson, could you relinquish your seat for these gentlemen? Or do you want to? Yeah, go ahead, Jeremiah.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Jeremiah Riemann here on behalf of the Wyoming County Commissioners Association. I am joined by two commissioners that I'd like to have speak before me, and then I'll offer some comments. I do have one proposed amendment that's being passed out to you right now. To my right is our current board president, Mr. Jim Willix, a commissioner from Converse County. And then online, we have Pete Gosar, who is the chairman of the Albany County Commission. So with that, I'd like for Commissioner Willix, and then if it's okay, Commissioner Gosar.
Sure, go ahead. Good, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Jim Willix, Converse County Commissioner and President of the Wyoming County Commissioners Association. You know, this program is an incredibly valuable program. As was noted, front loading for those industrial projects is key for counties and municipalities. I will admit it's an imperfect system, and part of the problem is we're trying to look forward and project what's going to happen and try to take care of that at the front end. And that is a challenge for all of us as we look at it. I've gone through this 5 or 6 times in Converse County personally as a commissioner. And each time we hope we get a little better at projecting what's out there. So keeping this program in place is incredibly valuable. And I know that's the intent here, is to try to create some of those sideboards with it. the things that we face, and I think it was alluded to that sometimes there's been funding for things that haven't happened, and law enforcement was pointed out. And that's one of the real challenges. You've got many times a huge workforce of transient people that come in for these big projects, and you don't know how that is going to impact your community. But statistically, when 100 people come in and 10 of them are bad, you've got to deal with it. And it's the same percentage of your residents. If you got 100 people in town, there's 10 of them that you have problems with. And so it's not like there's an increased percentage of people that will give you issues, but when you bring in a large group of people, there is. The other one that the Industrial Siting Council has struggled a little bit with is roads. And I'm glad to see that roads is a specific impact under this, because there's been some challenges with that. And for many of the counties, that's one of the biggest impacts, is how are we going to get a road to a standard that is necessary? Currently, and Jeremiah's memo, that we have not taken a position as a body yet, but we kind of oppose the bill in its current form, but we believe an amendment that we'll propose will get us to, if not neutral, support. And you're going to hear a contrary opinion from Commissioner Gozar, and that's why I'm not sure where we'll end up. But we do believe there's an amendment here that will make it more favorable to the group to look at. But again, the program's incredibly valuable. We know we work at it hard. It's a long process in front of the Industrial Siting Council. They take it seriously, but they have the same challenges that you guys do when you're trying to look forward and project what's going to happen. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I do believe that the program has validity, is valuable, and with some of the amendments that Jeremiah may put forward, we'll find it more favorable for us as a group. But do appreciate the work you're doing on trying to create those sideboards and make it a little more defined. Again, there's a reporting requirement. We are always glad to report on how we spent money. That is transparency, and we are in favor of that and don't have any issues with that. The issue we have is the percentages within the tier, and you'll hear more from Jeremiah as we go forward. So, Mr. Chairman, with that, I would stand for questions or wait till both of us speak, whichever way you'd like to do it.
Okay. So right now, are there any questions right now? Okay. Well, yeah, sit tight. We might have some later on.
Thank you, Mr.
So
Chairman.
then I send Commissioner Gozar would like to speak next, and go ahead and give us a little, you can hear us, I assume?
I can, Chairman Greer. Good morning. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. So go ahead, sir.
Well, thank you. And I really do appreciate your time that you're taking to hear me today, and especially the remote ability. And thanks to Jeremiah and Commissioner Willicks. We might agree more, Jim, than you think. I am the chairman of the Albany County Commission, and I'm in opposition to the bill as it currently suggests, as it's written. I think the current process at 2.76% is not attainable. I don't know that there is a place or a project that has attained 2.76%. I'll just use a current and a future project in Albany County, the Rail Tie Wind project for us. A lot of detail, 50 to 100 pages of work by the county to detail the impacts. That came in less than 30% of a 30% reduction in what we asked for. So 2.76% is aspirational. I wish we could get there, but it doesn't seem like we can. It seemed during that meeting that there was little empirical information or data that was used to reduce our request. It would be great if there was more empirical data. I'm with Mr. Willicks, Commissioner Willicks. It's hard to project. I think we see Craig, whose business is to project, having a difficult time. I think as counties who aren't professional in that business, it's difficult to project. And so to have a reporting and to have some data and some empirical data for counties to help counties, I think that would be helpful. But I also think it would help for all of us to understand why those reductions were made by the Industrial Siting Council to the requests that were put in good faith. Without the data, this is a highly uncertain business to try to ascertain impacts, and to remove some of the flexibility that this law would suggest makes it very difficult in a highly uncertain environment to remove some flexibility with regard to counties. I think as you move the tiers down, I don't know that the Industrial Siting Council will not just reduce that 30%. I'm not sure in the bill, I don't see anything that would reduce that ability for the Industrial Siding Council. I understand the need to have some oversight, but I think there are other ways to do that. I think if there were law enforcement monies given that weren't used, I think there should be clawback provisions. I don't know that just saying, well, we're just going to give you less money so there'll be less abuse. I don't know that is something I would agree with. In the 2 times that we have put it together here, the one coming before the Industrial Siding Council, we worked with 8 different entities over a Friday to try to make our cases to each other and to make it fit within the requirements of the statute. I think everybody was operating in good faith, and many people made legitimate cuts that were probably going to be harmful to their entity, but we had to, there's a world we have to live within. And so I think that the reporting requirements, when we were asked to rail tie, would you voluntarily report? And I wholeheartedly said yes. I think that is the first step into understanding what the impact of this stuff would be, and to have a more scientific approach to it. But I also think that asking counties and towns and cities to say, well, I think you've missed this one, Industrial Siding Council, please tell us how you're going to be missed. I don't know, that sounds great on paper, but practicality, it just allows me to think that that's just really not a reasonable approach. I don't think it's going to be useful. I think there's no incentive for the Industrial Siding Council to come back and say, yeah, we missed this one. Here's another 0.25%. And so I think, well, for all those things, that I love the program. I think it's important to a county like ours, who is as efficient with tax dollars as any county in Wyoming, that this is really important. We might have 2 wind projects coming at the same time. That has impacts, one in the south, one in the north of the county, that it's very difficult for us to ascertain what that value is. But removing some of the flexibility that exists under the 2.76 makes that much more difficult as local entities. So thank you very much. I really do appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you for your testimony. You got a question from Representative Gray.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Gosar, as you said, there might be more agreement than maybe Commissioner Willicks kind of led on at the start. I mean, I think we do disagree. I think on the cap, I think we should lower that in this bill. But Senator Rothfuss from, of course, your county has talked about us doing a more comprehensive approach. And my position is whether or not this passes, we can do that. But the issue, I think, Commissioner Gosar, is going to be that there's no way to, the reason I think partially the Industrial Sidings Commission is building in this 30% buffer is there's just no way right now for us to know whether the dollars are going to what the request is. I mean, as Representative Western said at our last meeting, I mean, it could go to a popcorn machine and we wouldn't know. And if I remember right in that exchange, the person answering said, yeah, it could. And so to me, if we do go into this full-on review of the statute in the interim, as Senator Rothfuss has suggested, it's basically going to go nowhere if the counties, if the entities are opposed to us having that kind of transparency. And I'm just concerned that that from the start, the association is going to say this is overreach. I think that is probably the way the discussion is going to go 5 minutes into meeting 1 on this, on a proposed bill, and definitely in meeting 2 once we get something on paper. So I think ultimately, if we are going to look comprehensively at this, I think lowering the cap, I think this is pretty modest at the start, but if you know, it goes both ways, I guess, is my comment. And I guess I'll just end with, would you agree? Thank you.
Commissioner Gosar, you have a response.
Chairman Greer, Representative Gray, thank you. I agree to some of that. I think that there is, I live in the world in my day job as a nonprofit executive director, and granting is the world that I live in. And, you know, this has very many similarities to the granting processes. You ask for the money. The money is given if you're lucky enough to win the grant, and then you prove that you used the money the way you said you were going to. If you don't, you send the money that you didn't use back. And so I think that type of process is something that could be used here. I think the reporting requirements are legitimate, not only as a commissioner, but also as a citizen of the state of Wyoming. I really do think that's important. I don't know that you can make really good decisions without empirical data. And so collecting that data, I think, is useful in this reporting. And so when the Industrial Siding Council asked us, would we voluntarily report in rail tie? I said, yes, certainly we would. Because this is how you get to know what these might be. And so I hope I've answered that question, but if I haven't, please ask me again, and I'll try to frame it so that I can.
I think we got a good exchange of ideas. Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Commissioner. No, we got 20 minutes. We want to work this bill. So
thank you, Mr. Chairman. And a little bit to Mr. Representative Gray's point, the worst thing that happens if the money is invested in the local community. That's the worst thing that happens under this program. It may not go to exactly what we thought we were at the front end, but the worst thing that happens is we invest money in our local communities, and I still consider that a win. I agree we should be reporting. I agree we should look at some of that, but I think that's the worst thing that happens is we still invest in our local communities. And I think that's a net positive under the current program or this future program. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, I want us first by starting with.
Good, Jeremiah, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, again, Jeremiah Riemann. I'm here on behalf of the Wyoming County Commissioners Association. First, I want to express my appreciation to Representatives Heiner and Larson. We did collaborate over the summer to try and get to a good point on this bill. There's one piece that remains our concern, and I'll get to that. But I feel we did great work together and produced a lot of good information. There is much we like in this bill. There are pieces in this bill that we have been calling for years. We've been asking, and I shared with the committee this summer, a letter that we sent to the department asking them to adopt a definition for unmitigated impacts so that we all had better clarity around how to approach this program. We also asked for reporting. There's been this rumor out there that there has been misuse of these funds. I've found nothing to that effect. In fact, I produced for you, and I'm providing it to you again today, Carbon County's accounting for how they are using this funds. If anybody else wants that information from one of the counties, please ask. We'll be happy to provide that. When we asked for the department to include that in their rules, we were advised we don't feel we have the authority to request it. That's why you hear Commissioner Gosar talking about, would you voluntarily provide it? We're happy to voluntarily provide it. And I hope that this is a good representation of that commitment to you. And I would be happy to get it from others. Mr. Chairman, the one issue that remains is the bottom tier of this system. We did propose the tiered system because we felt it was a better approach to getting at what we heard as the concern from the state of, if we have $1 billion project, we're on the hook potentially for, $27.6 million. And we said, well, the biggest impacts that exist in this system typically are related to the smaller projects because they don't generate the revenue that other projects can often have, and they're generally wind projects. I'm going to come back to that issue and why that matters here in a second. So I heard reference to the tiers. I just want to clarify what the tiers really are, because I think that they were a little off in what was represented. The first tier is projects $350 million or less. The second tier is $350 million to $850 million. And the third tier is everything over $850 million. There's no $1 billion $1 billion level. So I just want to make that clear. I did provide a document that shows you what the difference is. We feel we've given a lot in this tiered approach. If you look at the maximum that we lose under that third tier, it's $10.7 million. Under the middle tier, 6.4. What we're asking for is some help on those front end to get back up to the 2.76%. So why is that important? A few things. I heard reference that the locals always remain whole because the locals get their sales and use tax. That's not necessarily correct. And let me just give a couple of examples. Let's just assume that wind turbines for a project in Carbon County are delivered to Natrona County, or project in Lincoln County, the materials are dropped off in Sweetwater County. Sweetwater County and Natrona County get the sales and use tax from that system. The state gets its sales and use tax from that system. The locals get nothing. And often, as we know, wind turbines are being dropped in Natrona County and shipped over to Carbon County for installation. So this program is absolutely critical for that county and being able to address the impacts of this industrial development that is happening. That could happen in many other places. The difference between, as you can see in my spreadsheet, between the 2.55, which is the maximum that you can go to in that lower tier, and the next, or going up to 2.76, is $735,000. That can mean a lot for a community that has to build a bridge or a new road, or have to provide some other essential service to that industrial development. And thus part of the reason that we're requesting that. And I will just close in saying that if you allowed that 2.76%, the Industrial Siting Council has to report to you that they did that. That's a component of this bill. So there will be some oversight beyond just the Industrial Siting Council. So again, it's the last remaining issue. I'm just asking for that one tier to move back to the 2.76. And remember, it starts at 2.25%. The council has to come to a finding and then report to you. I think it's an easy, frankly, from my perspective, give against everything that we've given in this program, and would appreciate your consideration on that.
Okay, thank you. Committee, any questions? Yep, Representative Hunter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Raymond, for being here. So as I understand it, the first tier will still remain 2.25, but the relief valve, which we may call a relief valve in extenuating circumstances where the Industrial Siting Commission feels like there is no way that they could get by with the 2.25. We provide a relief valve of 2.55, and you're proposing that we amend that up to the 2.76, which granted is only $700,000 difference. If we were to do that, Jeremiah, would the County Commissioners Association come out in support of this bill?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, appreciate that question. But Representative Heiner, I don't know that we would get to the point of supporting the bill. I think I would fight, and I'm making that commitment, that we would not oppose this bill moving forward in the system. The only reason that I don't know I can get us to support is it is a reduction in the overall program, but I have collaborated with you, and I'm willing to make that argument that we should, at the very least, not oppose the bill.
Okay, any further questions? Okay, thank you. Thank you. We appreciate that. Anybody else wishes to testify on this? Okay, not seeing anyone moving. I'm going to go ahead and close public testimony. What is the committee's pleasure? Okay, moved by Representative Graves, seconded by Representative Burkhart. Okay, any general discussion on the bill or just go ahead and work through it? Not, we squeezed 4 bills into one morning, so we're doing good. But okay, so why don't we go ahead and work this particular bill? So anything on page 1, committee? Page 2. And just speak up. I'll keep my head down. Page 3.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to recommend that we, on page 3, line 13, delete applicant and add the phrase or the words county, cities, and towns.
Is there a second? Okay. Would the committee would the movement be opposed to doing the same on page 10, line 2?
Oh, did I forget of that? That is favorable.
Okay. And Barb, you're tracking us? Yes, yeah, we'll be here. No, it's counties, comma, cities, no comma, and towns. I think that's proper.
Oh, and or town.
Committee, you get set movement and second agree with that? Any discussion on the amendment? Question being called, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that amendment is adopted. And Barbara, you and I'll circle up afterwards. I use it. Okay. Anything further on page 3? Okay, page 4. Representative Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would propose an amendment to change on line 15 and 16 from 2.55 to 2.76. And this is the relief valve that County Commissioners Association requested. See what is the favor of the committee is.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. Then did you look, Representative Heiner, does that need to be duplicated on page 11 for consistency purposes? Does it? Okay, and as part of your motion, second's good with that? Okay, discussion on the amendment. Barb, we'll just use, this will work for reference. Okay, yeah, Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would really ask the committee to vote no on this one. Let's just sort of step back for a second. I know we're about 11 minutes, but
we've got all time in the world. We can be late. Okay.
Thank you.
We need to debate this.
Appreciate this. Thank you. I mean, we go back 4 years. It's been pretty much every year except I think one that I've been in the legislature. I've just watched this bill. It's always failed for a variety of reasons. Like Representative Larson said last time came out of this committee, I think, and it was like 2-up on that Friday, and it just didn't get done. So they came back and they really did negotiate. I mean, and what the County Commissioner Association was proposed was this tiered system, but where they gave was in a tier that I think they've never hit before. If they have, it's very rarely. And so in the tiers that they are hitting, which is mostly the first tier, it's lowering it from 2.76 to 2.55, which is pretty modest when it was 2% earlier. And that second tier, which is my understanding, very rarely hit, occasionally, but very rarely. And granted, you're getting scale as the project goes up in size in terms of the unmitigated impacts. It does go down to 2%. So in that first tier, which is not surprising, it seems to be their main concern because it's where majority hits, it's going down only to 2.55. Now they want to have this relief valve that takes it up so that it can take it to where it is now. And I don't think that's reasonable enough. I think that where we're at is a pretty modest change. And so I would just vote no on this and appreciate the work that those working on this have done. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Yep, go ahead.
Thank you,
Representative
Mr.
Sherwood.
Chairman. I just want to commend everyone who spent many years and hours on this. This is a beautiful cleanup. And if we can pass this amendment, I will be enthusiastically voting yes, where I've historically voted no. So I think this just is a very nice compromise for where we're at with this project.
Okay, any further discussion? Representative Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just feel like we keep going around in circles. I rarely agree with my colleague over here on the right, and I'm in full agreement with him this morning. I mean, we've done a lot of work through the interim, and I really appreciate the work that my colleagues that did. And we have multiple testimonies saying that they haven't reached this criteria. So I'm in agreement. We need to keep it where it's at. They haven't reached that pinnacle. So we need to vote this down.
Any further discussion, committee? Okay. Ready for the question? Just go ahead and vote with a raise of hands. All those, everybody understands the amendment, which is raise the cap as recommended by, okay. All those in favor, raise your hand. Up, one. All those opposed? Okay, that amendment has failed. Anything further on page 4? Page 5? Page 6? 7? Page 8? Page 9? 10? 11? 12? 13? 14? Okay. Nothing further. Committee's ready to vote. Okay, question being called. Roll call vote on House Bill 47, please.
Representative Bear,
Aye.
Representative Burkhart,
Aye.
Vice Chairwoman Diamond,
Aye.
Representative Bear,
Aye.
Representative Gray,
Aye.
Representative Heiner, Representative Sherwood,
No.
Representative Western, Chairman Greer.
Aye. Representative
Eight ayes.
Heiner, as a committee member, will floor manage this for us. Thank you. Okay, do we have committee, did everybody get in their contact information to Barb? Okay, so let's make sure and do that. And then just on the, okay, so we have an intern for interim topics. Just take a look at that. We also, Chairman Anderson and I have already reserved some dates. I guess I didn't get them in my phone. I will ask Brian to get us a memo with those dates. We'll circle them around.